You were talking a lot about carrots and sticks as two tools how to get probably this new evolution of the process of, well, really a sectoral bargaining. And for us, the whole concept is very strange, I think. We think that there is an achievement that is regulated by law and everyone should be equal. Would you say that there is a new trend in Europe, or we are like lacking behind the normalities that you shouldn't take whole minimum wage to each sector, but look, each and other sector to be divided, to be treated differently, and this gives the full boost to economy and to this, of course, social agreement and social welfare itself. So how do you think it would grow in a case of Eastern European country, Latvia?
A whole new trend. No, I think Europe, as I mentioned earlier, it's very diverse. We have still 28 member states, and industrial relations, social dialogue goes back to national tradition, national law. And I think there's a big divide between what we still call the old EU of the 15 and not so new member states who joined in 2004 and 2007. The old EU member states would be an EU of sectoral level collective bargaining. This is the private level of collective bargaining in the old member states. Just take my country of origin, Germany. Yeah. The biggest trade union in the world, it's called in German IG Metall. Whenever you pronounce this in English, it sounds like a hard rock band, IG Metal. They have 2 million members. It is a sectoral trade union, a metal trade union. And so it is the case for Austria and other Italy, other EU member states. When the new member states joined in 2004, it was a completely different picture. You have mainly company-level collective bargaining, like the rest of the world. The rest of the world, America, China, Japan, it's all company-level collective bargaining. So different traditions, and now apparently some of the member states, and Latvia is one of them, you are exploring the possibilities of moving from company level to sectoral level. And as I mentioned earlier, I think it's a very interesting, it's a good move, because sectoral collective bargaining correlates with higher collective bargaining coverage, which means a better protection for workers in terms of working conditions. But we were also able to show that it does not go at the expense of competitiveness. Those countries having sectoral collective bargaining, high collective bargaining rate in Europe, they also are very strong in terms of industry performance, in terms of competitors. So it looks like a win-win situation, and I think it's a very brave move and very interesting move from Latvia to try to make this move.
And when we do this move, we have some members of sectors, some members of even industry within sector that is let's say, modern approach, but then few are not willing to reform. Is that also normal, that the change of the perception of what does it mean, the social bargaining, and what is the benefit, is also something that is a full process?
Yes, that's very normal. And again, when I spoke about in my talk about the different industrialization regimes, in the past, the country of origin, the country industrializations were so important. So Italy would have completely different industrial relations from the UK. Nowadays, we see more and more that those differences are not so important anymore, but the sectors are more different. So like the lady said, the HoReCa sector in Latvia probably has much more in common with the HoReCa sector in Finland or Norway than others. So it depends on the sector, because some of the sectors, they are national. A Latvian hairdresser, he or she is not exposed to competition. You cannot do teleworking and hairdressing. You cannot. Yeah. Yet other sectors are exposed to competition, and they would have different expectancies. So they would probably be more reluctant to sectoral collective bargaining, because they would say, well, we are competing with China, we are competing with Japan, and they are much more flexible. So the sector really, different sectors have different interests in terms of collective bargaining, and that's one of the difficulties you have to bridge. But this difficulty has to be bridged in all member states, because sectors have different expectations. Like in any federation, whether you have companies in the federation or sectoral associations, they have different expectations and you have to manage them one way or another.
We've got a better capability to do reforms when there was a full crisis, the full drop of GDP in Latvia. Some say that because of now there is no crisis and there is blooming and booming of many industries here. This is also one of the reasons why people don't see reason for reforms of the, the whole concept to be introduced differently. What do you say? Should we wait for the next crisis and then we are ready to any kind of sectoral bargaining or at least new version of this triangle?
On the contrary, I would just argue the other way around. I think it's a great occasion to do this right now, because what you get in times of crisis, very often you would get what we would call concession bargaining.
Yes.
So because one side is weaker, either the trade unions employers, most of the times in the crisis it's the trade union side, they agreed to something which they would normally not agree to. So something is forced upon them. Decentralization, less wages, wage reduction, pension reforms. So it's, in one way, from an industrial relation perspective, it's a one-sided story. Whereas if you do something in good times, or better times like we have now, and the initiative comes from both sides, and both sides agree, I think the agreement as such has a higher legitimacy, more of a moral standing, because both sides are on an equal footing, they have the same initiative and they agree. I think it's a much better scenario than agreeing on something in terms of crisis when one side is weaker than the other.
Great, thank you.